Hello, viewers. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the Elden Ring narrative. I'm going to review the religion of the Frenzied Flame, the particular storyline, quest line that we can do in this game. Now, it goes without saying, and I might as well warn those who peradventure have not completed it or have not done it or do not want to learn information that could jeopardize their playthroughs. If you haven't played through this, or if you want to buy the game and play it, then please come back to this video after you play it or after you complete this. Now, if you are one of my viewers who wants to learn symbolism, who wants to understand some narrative implications, some media implications, you'll have no problem. To be honest, I'm going to explain everything very thoroughly, or as thoroughly as I can, and we're going to once again review these concepts of order and chaos. Now, I know not all of you have watched my philosophical video about good and evil. Of course, all of the videos that I do oftentimes have something to do with philosophy. And I often talk about order and chaos, so this shouldn't be any surprise. Nonetheless, I feel I should tell new subscribers or viewers, or whoever finds this video, and some of you may already know, here I do things a good deal differently than most individuals, especially people who are doing videos about Elden Ring now. I mostly do critique, I also do commentary, I also review implications about media. I endeavor to find the meaning in media. I have often had some individuals who are very confused about that, but the comment forum is open, completely open. Anyone who wants to comment can. I encourage it, and hopefully anyone who's interested can have some very good discussions with me. And if somehow your comments are deleted, then most likely than not, unless you're being extremely disrespectful, it is not me deleting them. It is YouTube, and if that is the case and you really want to have a discussion about some things having to do with narrative, media, religion, philosophy, what have you, please feel free to email me on the profile, on the About page, the About section on my YouTube channel. I may update that email at some point, but the email on the channel now, Grass Connoisseur, which was a terrible name to choose. I really don't know why I chose that name. To be honest, I'm no connoisseur of grass whatsoever. For some reason, I thought that name was quite funny, and I used to have some lawn grass as a profile picture. I don't smoke any grass. I don't do that sort of thing. I am a sober individual. But for some reason, I thought that name was quite funny. I don't know why. I wasn't even thinking about marijuana when I had chose that name. I was thinking about regular grass. I was thinking, how novel is it to be a connoisseur of grass? I know it sounds stupid and completely ridiculous, but at the time that was my thought, and so since I chose that email, I can't really change it now. It's a bit too late, isn't it? But that's besides the point. That's quite fine. You can use the email if you like. Alright. So, I don't know if I've told you any of that these games that FromSoft has made over the many years that they have been making them, these FromSoft RPGs, whether it be Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, Bloodborne, they're all very religious games. The last time FromSoft made well, of course, even King's Field Forever, Kingdom, Evergrace, these different RPGs, they weren't as religious as these games are. And I'm talking about defined ideologies, worldviews, sort of philosophies. All of these are synonyms, and there are certain religions in Elden Ring. Quite honestly, what we might traditionally consider to be religions. And they're very explicit about it. There are all manner of different concepts, different gods, and what have you. And one of these gods is the Frenzied Flame, so to speak. Now, the game is so big that, to be entirely honest, I had thought about how I would do these blogs and videos. And I thought if I do a video about Elden Ring, it should most certainly be comprehensive. However, I had eventually realized that these blogs and videos about Elden Ring could not be very big. They couldn't be too big. Because if they were too big, I simply would not be able to go through all of the information. And not only that, if I did make them so unwieldy that I would have to read for hours, it would be very uncomfortable. That is what I did with my Demon Souls blog on narrative and different religious and symbolical concepts. That was at least 60 or so pages long. This is not going to be that long. So, without further ado, I will begin. As I said, this is going to be an educational video. This isn't what some individuals might call, a lore video. This is about lore and narrative, but it is also about implications. So this is for people who really want to understand the piece of media that Elden Ring is. Hopefully, all of you who are watching may derive some benefit from it. Anyhow, the religion of the Frenzied Flame, it's a religion of chaos. Before order, there was chaos, and these worshippers of the Frenzied Flame, they are fascinated by the concept of chaos. They feel as though this is the supreme truth behind all of existence. They don't like order. For them, it is separation from the whole. So, chaos is often, interestingly enough, represented by water and the abyss, so to speak. So, in an alchemical sense, it can be represented by a fiery crucible that also represents chaos. The Flame of Frenzy, if we look at it, it has a watery quality to it. It isn't, it's very interesting. It isn't necessarily like the other flames in the game. It's somewhat like the lava from the Great Serpent, but it is yellow, which has some interesting implications. It pours forth from the eyes of its host as tears. the flame itself, it's related to the primordial crucible, which we read about in Elden Ring, in which all life is mixed together, the mixture of all substances, which would eventually be set into order. So, here we have Random House Webster's Dictionary says that primordial is existing at or from the very beginning. Primordial matter, Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary says primordial. Etymology, Middle English, Late Latin, primordialis, dialis, from Latin primordium, origin, primus, first, plus ordire, to begin. So it's the first created or developed, primeval, existing in or pre-existing from the beginning as of a solar system of universe. So a crucible is a vessel of a refractory material such as porcelain for melting and calcining a substance that requires a high degree of heat. And calcining means, I have forgotten, actually, and I have to look at this. Calcine is to heat, as inorganic materials to high temperature but without fusing, in order to drive off volatile matter or to effect changes as oxidation or pulverization. Interesting. Alright. So we have the aspects of the crucible breath, which is, this is a manifestation of the Erd Tree's primal vital energies, an aspect of the primordial crucible where all life was once blended together. So here we have a definition once again for an oven or a furnace, a mother symbol. This is a feminine symbol. This oven. The alchemist's crucible is symbolic of the body, and the alembic is expressive of the vas hermetus. But it has a further significance as a symbol of pure spiritual gestation. It is in this sense that the glowing furnace makes its appearance in so many alchemic treatises, such as Michael Mayer and the Museum Hermeticum. That's from a Dictionary of Symbolism of Symbols, 2nd edition by J.E. Surlow. I believe that's how you pronounce that. But anyhow, there is an understanding that all things were formed from chaos, and it is an idea that is present all over the world in all types of ideologies, philosophies, and religions. It's pertinent for us to understand what this word means. So we have from and I've used this dictionary before, from the Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, chaos, it's confusion. It's the confused mass of elemental substances supposed to have existed before God reduced creation into order. The poet Hesiod is the first extant writer that speaks of it. Light uncollected, through the chaos urged its infant way, nor order yet had drawn his lovely train from out the dubious gloom. Okay, so chaos is everything mixed together, is one thing. There's no two, there's no duality, there's no differences or separateness. All is plastic, that is to say, all can be molded, and it's formless without any definition. So in Genesis we have the creation of the earth in heaven as it is described. So the earth is a void, dark, formless expanse. It says here, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Genesis verse 1 through chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. Alright, so the Greek philosopher Anaxagoras, he spoke of the first mind, establishing order, setting all things in order. So here we have it. Anaxagoras, the son of Hegesibulus, or Eubilus, was a native of Clazomene. He was the pupil of Anaximenes, and was the first who set mind above matter, for at the beginning of his treatise, which is composed in attractive and dignified language, he says, all things were together, then came mind and set them in order. Page 63, The Complete Works of Diogenes Laertius, Lives of the Eminent Philosophers. Okay, so, interesting concept. The mind of God sets things into order. The first cause. Many people have spoken of it, and it is a very ancient understanding. It's very simple. So Philo Judaeus, who was a precursor to the Neoplatonists, he expressed this idea that the spiritual, that is to say the mental, the things of the mind, precedeth the physical. But Moses, who had early reached the very summits of philosophy, and who had learnt from the oracles of God the most numerous and important principles of nature, was well aware that it is indispensable that in all existing things there must be an active cause and a passive subject, and that the active cause is the intellect of the universe, thoroughly unadulterated and thoroughly unmixed, superior to virtue and superior to science, superior even to abstract good or abstract beauty, while the passive subject is something inanimate and incapable of motion by any intrinsic power of its own, but having been set in motion and fashioned and endowed with life by the intellect, became transformed into that most perfect work, this world. The works of Philo Judaeus, his work Creation. So basically in Elden Ring, what we call God, or what was called God in Demon Souls, is now called the Greater Will. So they're using the same concept that they used in Demon Souls, except they're using a different word for the first cause, which is God. And this becomes very apparent as we play the game and learn more about the religions in it and how things happen to transpire. Some of this information, as you can see, I have used in the Demon Souls blog, as well as the more philosophical video about virtue. So the first cause is God. So he impresses his mind, his cognition, which his active mind, which is the only thing that's active, upon passive matter. So his reasoning and thinking is known as his logos, or the Word, as we Christians know Jesus Christ. By the Word he made all things. The concept is that he gives it form, he gives it life, he gives it activity. Physical matter on its own, or what we call chaos, the first matter, the void formless world, as stated in Genesis, has no life in it, lest the Lord give it life by his word. Giving it form, shaping it. Because if he did not, it would just be formless and void. He gives all things their purpose by his cognition. Anyhow, the Logos is perceived as the basis of all order in the universe. This order we may call providence, providence, fate, causality, among other words that we use to express this conception of right thinking by which all things are created, given form, and purpose. So, we have here from all works of Epictetus, the introduction, in which Elizabeth Carter states that fate is no more than a connected series of causes. God is the first original cause on which all the rest depend. From the Century Dictionary, 1889, causality, that which constitutes a cause, the activity of causing, the character of an event as causing, the relation of cause to effect, or of effect to cause, the law or principle that nothing can happen or come into existence without a cause. Now, we're talking about causality because we know about that in Elden Ring, one of the fundamentals of the Golden Order is the law of causality. Causality is the pull between meanings, that which links all things in a chain of causation. So if God, the first cause, affecting passive matter, by his mind, giving it form, giving it shape, giving creation, creating things and giving life, and everything is sort of linked in a chain of cause and effect. People do different things. Their lives are ordered by providence. Everything is ordered by God, and everything is connected through cause and effect. There's a principle of activity in life in the universe. All, of course, coming from the first cause. So it can be said that causality establisheth order, and regression is returned to a chaotic state before order. This chaos is a state of no causal relationships. There's no pull between meanings because there are no meanings or differences. There is no chain of relation, which is to the votary of the Frenzied Flame. They perceive this to be the ideal state, which is chaos. Now, Stedman's Medical Dictionary has a good definition for chaos: state of such total disorganization that it can have no constructive predicates, a state in which no causal relationships are operating. Greek, primeval, formless void. So we have here also the law of regression. Regression is the pull of meaning that all things yearn eternally to converge. So when things are regressing, they're going back. So whether you consider it a force or a law, a convergence, such as entropy, everything reverting back into base components. So the ordered things are becoming disordered. They're breaking down. In a sense, they're becoming the same. It's very interesting. If you were to set fire to something and burn it, all of it becomes black, and really all distinguishing qualities are destroyed and taken away. And in a sense, entropy is like a slow burn. But everything is breaking down. That which once had form and order and it had strong structure eventually breaks down. This is the idea, the principle of entropy. Figurative lack of order, predictability, gradual decline into disorder. So we've reviewed the concepts of order and chaos to some degree. Let us turn our attention to the proselytes of the religion of the Frenzied Flame. So we have Hayata. Hayata is a blind woman who, she was once Arena, and we know the story if we played the game. Arena is killed by some chimerical creatures called misbegotten, who basically take over the castle that her and her father lived in, who were servants to the people in that castle, but they rebelled and killed everyone there, or at least tried to. Irina escapes. She gives a letter to the Tarnished to carry to her father, but she is killed eventually. And so we find her again, but she has a different name. Her name, Irina, meant peace. And it is interesting that she should become, basically, in a sense, a vessel for the Frenzied Flame. Because chaos is certainly the opposite of peace, we would think. So, she feeleth a light when she eateth the eyes of those who devoted themselves to the Frenzied Flame. These eyes are disgustingly referred to as Shibiri grapes. So Shibiri is considered the demon of blindness in Jewish lore. So we have here Shibiri is the demon of, already said that. He rests atop uncovered water at night, including pools and rivers, and causes blindness in anyone who drinks it. He is especially attracted to clear and shining vessels. To render Shibiri powerless before drinking, say the incantation, Shaburi, Biriri, Riri, Jiri, Ri. I am thirsty for water in a white glass. The reduction of his name causes him to shrink in size and vanish. His name in Hebrew translates to mean dazzling glare, or more literally, breaker of the eyesight. Very interesting. So that is from the Encyclopedia of Demons in World Religions and Cultures by Teresa Bain. And I feel the need to actually, some of you may wonder where to find such books. Some of you, peradventure, have wondered, where do I find such books, and how do I get so many of them? But I can show you. I use a lot of PDFs. You can find a book like this with a simple Google search. If you feel the need to find some of these books, a lot of them you can find with a simple Google search. A lot of them are good reference books for different occult, esoteric information that you may want to know and use in your research of media. It can easily be found. Alright. So, hello, is someone there? My name is Hayata, and I am journeying in search of the distant light. If I might be so bold as to ask, would you donate any Shibiri grapes in your possession to me? My eyesight has been weak since birth, you see. I can't tell which way I'm supposed to go next, but when I eat one of those grapes, I can feel a distant light in the back of my eyes. It will lead me to my true duty as a finger maiden. Hayata, Elden Ring. So when she has the Shibiri grape, she says, "Oh, many thanks to you. Now I can feel the distant light once more. You are most kind indeed. May the blessing of the fingers be upon you." Alright. So Jesus says something very significant about eyes in Matthew. He says, "The light of the body is the eye. Therefore, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? No man can serve two masters, for either he shall hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Matthew chapter 6, verse 22 to 24. So, the eye, the most important organ of the senses, always associated symbolically with light and intellectual perspicacity. At the same time, the eye has long been considered not only a receptive organ, but also the transmitter of beams, the image of spiritual expressivity. So it's almost as though symbolically the eye is almost treated as though it contains light of its own, which is very interesting. So, American Heritage Dictionary, perspicacity, acuteness of perception, discernment, or understanding. It's one of the favorite words of Andrew Tate. Okay, if you didn't know, it's very interesting. In modern psychology, the eye functions symbolically as the organ of light and consciousness, for it permits us to perceive the world and thus makes it real for us. So, from the Dictionary of Symbolism. Alright. So, Hayata, who's blind, she cannot discriminate visually. For her, all things are darkness. Now, darkness, if you didn't know, is often associated with chaos. Before there was creation, the world was without form, it was void, there was complete darkness. By eating eyes, the organs of visual sense, she is gathering light, perceptions, consciousnesses, understandings, experiences, and so forth. So, Hayata active is an eye biter in an indirect sense due to the fact that people voluntarily give her eyes. So, the Frenzied Flame, it merges all persons, differences, and individualities, forming a complete unitary whole. So eye biting was considered to be an involuntary form of the evil eye, though the eye biting in this case is literal, in that she's actually biting into eyes, but that isn't exactly what the Encyclopedia of Witches and Witchcraft and Wicca is really saying, but in Elden Ring she is literally biting into and eating eyes. And she says she's getting light from these eyes. It's almost as though the light of those people is going into her, and she's collecting it. Okay, after we traverse a sewer underneath Lindale, and a veritable abyss, we find on the last floor awaiting us. She's awaiting us on the last floor, and she taught us basically the creation of the world in Elden Ring in this little story. She says, thank you, I have touched them, the words of the three fingers. As your maiden, allow me to divine them. All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures and births and souls, but the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, everyone born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned, melted all away with the yellow chaos flame until all is one again. So here she's talking about the concept of chaos being the sort of prima materia, the sort of first matter, the substance that the Creator made all things out of. So she's saying, in a sense, that God made a mistake. So, all things were once, according to her, she says one thing, one great, God, or who we might know as the prime mover, the first cause, he expressed his his cognition. His cognition became impressed upon matter, giving it form and purpose, as we talked about before. It's a very important concept for us to understand in terms of this narrative of the Frenzied Flame. So the impression of mind upon matter is the cause of all differences, separateness, distinguishment, dichotomy, and division. So the votaries of chaos perceive this event to be of the first cause as the origin of all suffering, for they feel separated from the true wholeness, and the conceptions of it they have is as such. In their understandings, nothing can be individual, nothing can be different. All things have to become one. That's what they consider perfection. So the prime mover, the first cause, God, in Elden Ring, he is called the greater will. Although in Elden Ring he isn't given a gender. That's not so for us who are Christian. But anyhow, it very much is similar to the Platonic demiurge, so to speak. He's the cause of all creation. He is the creator, the craftsman, the maker, God. This is the ideological basis for Hayata's genesis of the world story that she tells us. So, the word demiurge means artisan. It's this Platonic understanding of a subordinate God who shapes and arranges the physical world. In the dialogue Timaeus, Plato identified the demiurge as the force that fashioned the world from the pre-existing materials of chaos. In Gnosticism, the early Christian era, the demiurge is regarded as an inferior deity who had created the imperfect material world and who belonged to the forces of evil, opposing the supreme God of goodness. And their understanding of the supreme God of goodness is basically the cosmic mind, the one thing, or the one great, in a sense. So their understandings are not unlike the votaries of the Frenzied Flame in Elden Ring. So the view that the Maker is a villain hath a spiritual equivalent in Gnosticism. In their view, the demiurge, that's to say artisan, he is keeping mankind from the truth. In their opinion, God is keeping the people ignorant, and they don't believe that what we consider God as the maker of all things, they consider him to be an inferior being. They believe that the popular understanding of God as the creator is keeping man ignorant. For them, the author of differences is the author of all evil, and the cause of all sin and strife. It may be that creation itself was a sin by their own logic, peradventure the very first in their view. Their heroes were the serpent and figures such as Prometheus. The serpent is in particular is a symbol of chaos, the sameness of all things. In regard to Prometheus stole fire from heaven and gave it to men, and it is said that the gods kept man in darkness. And Prometheus gave man fire, the type of knowledge, sort of intelligence. So Prometheus and the serpent are often talked about in the same way. Now in alchemy, the fundamental message of the Ouroboros, which is the serpent eating his own tail, is the changing one thing into another, ultimately yielding all is one. It is the symbol for Mercurius and the union of opposites. Alright. For the Nazarenes and Ophite Gnostic sects, the Ouroboros was equated with the serpent in the Garden of Eden. A hero rather than a villain, the serpent helped Adam and Eve defy the demiurge, Jehovah, and obtain the first gnosis, knowledge, by eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Oh yes, and the former, this is both Both of these quotes are coming from the Encyclopedia of Magic and Alchemy, by Rosemary Ellen Guiley. But later the serpent came to represent the guardian of the tree of life, and therefore the gatekeeper to immortality. Gnosticism, in a sense, is it's the opposite of Christianity, quite literally. Though you often see Gnostic-type narratives in media, movies and video games, quite often, I have seen. Now, the Gnostics viewed chaos or the abyss as the supreme being and the mother goddess. So we have the crucible, the stove or oven, being considered to be a mother symbol, and we have the abyss also being considered to be a mother symbol. And of course, if any of you have played the Dark Souls 1, and you saw the Witch of Izalith and the fire that she had used, the fire of chaos, there are similarities between her and her fire and a lot of her design and the flame of frenzy in Elden Ring. It's very interesting, and chaos is considered to be feminine, like a goddess. Now the abyss ambivalent as both the profundity and of the depth, and as abasement and inferiority. The watery abyss is the primordial source of the universe. The mother goddess, the underworld. In Gnostic symbolism, it is the supreme being, the author of aeons. From an illustrated encyclopedia of traditional symbols by J.C. Cooper. Okay, so if Rykard's Ronker here that talks about how these spirits became the Lord's kin, in the serpent's bowels, these heroes. He absorbed them, he ate them, he sort of assimilated them into him, and they're now, the serpent says they're family, and the serpent is a symbol of chaos, quite literally, in real life. Now, in Elden Ring, Rykard and the Great Serpent, they wish to eat the gods. That has some different implications and there are some things to talk about regarding word choice, but they have their own fire, which is like lava, and it looks similar to the tear-like watery fires of Frenzy, which appear to be akin to the hot liquids of a crucible. The principle of sameness is expressed in both the One Great and the Great Serpent. The primordial crucible and the bowels of the Great Serpent both represent the same principle of destroying differences. They're both breaking things down. Quite honestly. The votaries of the Frenzied Flame wish to return to the state of oneness before all differences. The representatives of the Flame of Frenzy. We have the 3 fingers, and for the greater will we have the 2 fingers. And the hand represents something. So, here we have it, in the figurative language of the Bible and beyond, hands have long represented power. So that's from the A to Z Guide to Bible Signs and Symbols. Okay, reference to hand or hands could also indicate a person's will or attitude. So we have the 2 fingers and the 3 fingers that we get to see in the game. Now, they are on hands, but it's a hand with 3 fingers, and we see a hand with 2 fingers. Now, what could that represent? Well, we don't know if the hand is right or left. We only see fingers. So it's not attached to a body, so the only thing that is the defining characteristic of these hands is how many fingers they have. So we have to rely on numerology. We have to rely on the significance of numbers. We have to understand what the numbers mean. What does 2 mean? What does 3 mean? So we have 3 fingers. The number 3 has to do with completeness. So, in the number 3, we have our first geometrical figure. The first time we can enclose an area, the triangle. 3, therefore, stands for that which is solid, real, substantial, complete and entire divine perfection. As we go through the Bible, we see that all things are specially that are specially complete are stamped with this number 3. So this comes from page 12, the miraculous significance of numbers and colors as they appear in the Holy Scriptures. Okay, so if the 2 fingers, the number represents dichotomy, differences, and duality. Fingers cannot speak, yet these were eloquent. Persistently did they wriggle, spelling out mysteries in the air. Thus did we gain the words of our faith. And indeed, it would be so in the words of the faith that they're referring to, and the sort of concept that they're expressing is order. So we have 1, 2, 3, in a sense, because we have the 1 great, then we have 2, and this sort of represents the splitting of that unity that was 1 and the establishment of order out of chaos. So 3 is the number of unity or completeness, and this is the sort of desire of these votaries of the flame of frenzy to sort of return all things to some type of wholeness or completeness. So in a sense, all of those numbers have a meaning. So there's 2 fingers and there's 3 fingers. 2 represents division, 3 represents divine sort of completeness and unity. So their standard for perfection is indeed chaos. It's returning everything back to a state of what they consider to be unity or completeness. So here we have some information about the number 2. 2 affirms that there is a difference. There is another. 1 is the first number by which we can divide another. For example, the earth lay in chaos, which had overwhelmed it. Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, its condition was universal, ruin, and darkness. The second thing recorded in connection with the creation was the introduction of the second thing, light. And the light is reason. Immediately there was a division of difference. There was division and difference, for God divided the light from the darkness. So the holy word of God, Jesus Christ, is light in our Christian understanding. Or at least those of us who are Christian, and philosophically it has basically the same meaning. And many of you, peradventure, have some degree of umbrage with Christianity and Christians, but what we believe is it also constitutes much of the basis for much classical philosophy, and the Abrahamic understandings of a God who sets creation, who sets the formless world into order, is exactly what many Greek philosophers believed as well. So this is just the truth. It has to do with history. It has to do with the culture of these things regarding classical philosophy. And truth be told, most of the reliable numerology that is used is biblical numerology. So these are the books I use because they're the best books to understand this information. That is exactly what I use. Anyhow, 2, the second day was characterized by division. Genesis chapter 1, verse 6, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. So we have 3. The first statement in the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The second statement is, and the earth was, or rather became, without form and void, difference. Okay. So the 2 fingers, they represent order. And that's due to the fact that all order requires division, dichotomy, variety. Therefore, without differences, there is chaos, hence immorality. Good is in contrast to evil. In society, proper conduct is in contrast to criminality. Beauty is in contrast to ugliness. Elements of reality are perceived and discerned, and are not considered to be one thing. The idea that differentiated reality and matter is a deviation from a great whole, or one thing, is an old belief dating back to ancient religions and philosophies. Therefore, the one thing within us, and this comes from Gift of the Gods, the Emerald Tablet, Alchemy for Personal Transformation. This has to do with that sort of non-dualistic philosophy. Moreover, the one thing within us and the one thing of the whole universe are really the same, just as the one mind within us and the one mind of the universe become the same in meditation. So, this is an individual who believes in the concept of the cosmic mind and this idea of universal godhood. And that's a whole different subject. But nonetheless, the principle of this individual basically believing that differences and this sort of belief in the concept of the one thing is being sacred is very pertinent to our discussion. So there are individuals who have experienced this sort of dissolution of self, of individuality, differences, and so on. So oftentimes it's altered states of consciousness due to drugs, meditation. They call it returning to source. Some people call it becoming one with the universe. So there's a good deal of phrases that are used to describe that. So I'm just going to read one here. This person says, a galaxy of stars spun endlessly through the universe. I was that. The rapture exceeded any pleasure, joy, ecstasy, or bliss that I had ever experienced or imagined. This was the most prolonged and intense bliss that I have ever known. Individuality dissolved into the primordial infinite joy. There was a complete loss of the condition of the skin-bound body-mind. There was no I or self. The most significant aspect of the state of unity was this transcending of the self-sense. There was not a union of the I with the lover, or I with the galaxy. Rather, there was only the undifferentiated unity and consciousness as all that. So that is from the same book about the Emerald Tablet, which is a very ancient alchemical writing from Egypt. Anyhow, this religion is very similar to many Eastern religions, many mystical religions, Gnosticism, and so on. Alright, so it's basically non-dualism, of which there are many proponents. They actively wish to promote experiences like that. They believe that division itself is an illusion. They have to destroy it. They have to either put their minds under hallucinogenic states, utilize meditation to so-called meditation, which really has nothing to do with deep thinking, as in meditation is an act of thought, but rather putting their minds to sleep, in a sense, or lessening the activity in their mind, and using any methods that they can to dissolve their sense of selfhood, their ego, so to speak. Their understanding that they are an individual, that they're not part of the one thing, the one great, so to speak. The same principle is expressed in Elden Ring with the Frenzied Flame, and in many other of the religions of Elden Ring. This idea of regression and causality. The same thing expressed in the Frenzied Flame religion is expressed in many of the other religions in Elden Ring. Such as the Great Serpent, for example. But anyhow, so they consider the reality of differences, of individuality to be basically a falsehood, to be something that makes them suffer, that makes them, separates them from transcending this reality. So they believe that must be unlearned, this idea of self, and that chaos is true reality. Then you are one with it. There is no you, so to speak. There's only the one thing. So therefore, they have been the traditional philosophical opponents of those people who believe that duality and order, they're essential aspects of existence, of reality. And the proponents of non-dualism believe that mankind hath been restricted by the belief in positive differences between good and evil. They believe it's all just a matter of subjective opinion. Among many different other things. Everything is malleable, everything is plastic, everything is chaotic in their view. And that this idea of form and differences, these are just illusions. So God and Satan are simply one, being different aspects of the one thing, because everything is an aspect of the one thing, and that one thing is essentially chaos. So, all polarities, all dualities, all differences are just simply illusions in their mind. And that is very interesting. But demon souls sort of promote a very similar concept of duality and non-duality, especially non-duality. So we could very well say that chaos, in a mental sense, that's insanity, a mind that lacks discrimination, coherence, or logic. Now this, for example, is a very interesting quote. In an essay from 1953, Grant writes that we should strive always to realize the void nature of things and to merge into that state of formless awareness. He described ultimate reality as a pure and perfect void, and as a prerequisite for enlightenment he stresses the complete union of opposites through insistence on the sameness of all things and not on their differences, which are purely illusory because mind-made. They believe that their mind makes the differences. In other words, they believe a higher state of reality would be something such as their out-of-body experiences, when they peradventure engage in trance work, the sort of Eastern proto-hypnosis, so-called meditation, yoga, what have you, yoking to the cosmic mind, when they're able to go out of their body and put their body to sleep and go, as they would say, travel to different realms. That to them is a higher reality, is true reality. They don't perceive this reality to be real. They perceive these experiences that they have when they are able to somehow, through whatever means, have out-of-body experiences, or able to engage in lucid dreams. They perceive that to be more real than things that they see with their own eyes. Even though things in a dream are malleable, things on what they call the astral plane are malleable, where their mind affects what happens. They consider themselves to be co-creators in a sense, and yoked with the cosmic mind. So, I mean, these are some of the ideas that some of these individuals have, who believe that there is no differences, that we are all have been put under some state of delusion, and that people need to recognize that all things are really one, and that if you think that there are differences, you are just being deluded. So that's why they insist on the idea that nothing has purpose, everything is void. For some individuals, that is what they consider to be where their power lies. Now we're going to talk about a few of the connections, especially regarding demon souls and Eastern religion, and their relation to this whole religion of frenzy, this whole religion of the flame of frenzy, especially Buddhism, Hinduism, in particular, for the most part, but in this case, the reference will be Buddhism. We've already talked about Gnosticism. Though many principles held in Buddhism are also held in common with Hinduism. So the concepts here still have to do with yoga, with the sort of cosmic mind. So the golden robe in demon souls, it's a sort of demon, and it was associated with madness. And its color was similar to the yellow frenzied flame in Elden Ring, and yellow is the color of unity. Yellow was said to be the color of unity. Unity in affection, unity with the spiritual powers of the universe. Comes from a very good book, The Symbolism of Color, spelt in a British way, by Ellen Conroy. Okay, the yellow robes represent the spiritual path of Buddhism. The yellow robe donned by the Buddhist is a symbol that he is now on a path that is to lead to spirituality. In a sense, unity with the all-mind, with the supreme cosmic mind, with in a sense, chaos. Okay. With him realizing his own godhood. The belief of these yellow-robed men is that they have within them a spark of the Godhead, and that by suppressing the bodily desires and by concentrating their whole mental and psychic energies towards trying to understand this higher part of their nature, they will become united with the Supreme Spirit and will understand how to do many things and see many things that the ordinary man cannot do or see. So this comes from The Symbolism of Color by Ellen Conroy. Alright. So, the nature of the old monk's enlightenment is the dissolution of self, and merging with the one thing, the one mind. Apparently he had recognized his own supposed divinity, and yet ultimately it was just part of something else. It was the root of his power was the old one, and he is trying to assimilate him. He will ultimately assimilate the old monk, and all other souls into itself as a collective soul. And the same principle is being expressed in the flame of frenzy, in the frenzied flame. So all individuality and personhood, it has to melt away. There can be no individual soul or person in this one great. All has to be one. So the ego has to be destroyed. Mayhaps thou hast heard this expression, you have to kill the ego, you have to kill the self. For some, that may very well seem incredibly ridiculous. That may seem quite horrible, but it is indeed the case. If you, viewers, have experienced or read books about so-called meditation, you have doubtless read and learned, and peradventure thou hast been given some very interesting information regarding ego and self, and you've been told you shouldn't have one, or that you should try your best to not have an ego or to destroy it completely, and sort of be non-judgmental person. And you've heard many of these things that, you know, you should not try not to be, you know, you should basically destroy the ego. It seems quite serious, but for those of us who have read books about meditation or practice it ourselves, we really know that it's quite a real practice. So the ego, from Century Dictionary, 1889. The I, that which feels, acts, and thinks. Any person's self, considered as essentially the same in all persons. This use of the word was introduced by Descartes and has long been current in general literature. So, in Elden Ring, one's eyes must melt, one's perspectives must melt, one's person must melt into chaos. In many Eastern ideologies, the ego is viewed as delusion, and much mental work and conditioning is used to achieve what they perceive as yoking themselves to what they consider to be the cosmic mind. So let us read the definition of ego from the Encyclopedia of Eastern Philosophy and Religion. Ego in Buddhism. The concept of an ego, in the sense of consciousness of one's self, is seen as composed of non-valid factors. As delusion, the concept of an ego arises when the dichotomizing intellect, the sixth sense, Shadatayatana, is confused into presupposing a dualism between I and not I, or other. As a result, we think and act as though we were entities separated from everything else, over and against a world that lies outside of us. Thus the idea of an I becomes fixed in our subconscious, a self which produces thought processes like I hate this, I love that, this is yours, this is mine. Nurtured by such conceptions, we reach the point where the I or ego dominates the mind and attacks everything that threatens its dominance, and is attracted to everything that seems to extend its power. Enmity, desire, and alienation, which culminate in suffering, are the ineluctable results of this outlook, which in Zen is cut through by the practice of Zazen. Thus, in the course of Zen training under a Roshi who leads people on the path to enlightenment, Satori Kensho, the dominance of the ego illusion over the practitioner's thinking and aspirations is gradually overcome. Now, here once again, we have the idea that suffering is caused by differences, by separateness. If there's separation, there's suffering. This very religion in Elden Ring, the Frenzied Flame, as Hayata said, she said that when there were differences, when there were births, souls, and fractures, when this one great was no longer one great, there was suffering. And so what does Hayata and the other people who are the the devotees of the Frenzied Flame try to do. They try to bring everything back into chaos. So, the concepts behind the fictional religion of the Frenzied Flame have to do with Gnostic beliefs and Buddhist beliefs and the sort of belief in the cosmic mind, the one thing, the alchemical understanding that all things are one, that this sort of oneness is what should be aspired to philosophically, that differences are the cause of suffering, that order itself is a type of illusion that should be dissolved. And the practice of that individually has to do with the dissolution of one's own ego, and the understanding that you as an individual are not an individual. You, the viewers. So that is very interesting. In a sense, the act of gouging out your eyes, it symbolizes the destruction of the ego. Their perceptions and their experiences, the eyes of the votaries of the flame of frenzy, they burn in the crucible. That is to say, quite disgustingly, Hayata's stomach. So she's taking their light. She's the vessel for their light, their understandings, their experiences, their perceptions. Everything they've seen, everything they've experienced, their capability to distinguish, to discriminate visually. It's almost as though that visual discrimination is itself a type of light that she is taking into herself. Now, she herself is blind. This blind woman is the vessel for the flame of frenzy, the light. These people who are doing this are people who feel hopeless. They've given up on everything, and they feel as though there is nothing for them in this world. This world is full of differences. And so they believe the only way to truly solve the problem of suffering is to return everything to the primal chaos from which all things came. They believe what was taken must be returned, all things must be one. God, the greater will, that is to say, has made a mistake, and they believe they will correct it. That's their belief. It's very interesting, but this whole concept, some people are just as avid and just as zealous in this belief as these individuals who happen to be fictional characters in this FromSoft RPG that we know as Elden Ring. So it really does express a concept that a great deal of individuals really do believe in. Alright, when the practitioner of yoga yokes their mind or endeavors to yoke their mind with what they consider to be the one thing, the cosmic mind, they are doing the same thing. They don't want the ego. They believe the ego is a delusion. They want to be part of something that will absorb them, that they will melt in. They don't want the self. They don't want the individual. They don't want the personhood that they have. They feel that that itself is a perversion of the one great, of the whole, of the primordial chaos. So in this narrative, chaos is considered crucible fire. It's light, it's enlightenment, so to speak. But the symbolism of the abyss, that is present too. You descend into the sewers of Lindell. It's like an abyss. You keep going further and further down, and it almost seems as though it's so deep going down into those sewers and catacombs, that area. It really is like an abyss. And in the sewers, all types of substances congregate in the sewers. In a sense, it has some relation to a crucible in itself, in that there's all types of substances just mixed together, which is quite disgusting but true. But that's where Hayata went, which is very interesting to think that a woman would go to such a terrible, nasty place. But I mean, this is a FromSoft RPG, and they often do things like this, and it's very, very interesting. So FromSoft has expressed the principle of chaos in myriad ways, and some I have yet to mention. This, however, will suffice as an explanatory treatise upon the religion the flame of frenzy. The path of the Lord of Chaos. Burn the Erd Tree to the ground and incinerate all that divides and distinguishes. Ah, may chaos take the world, may chaos take the world. So says Shiburi. In Elden Ring, when we meet him by the Zamor ruins. But it's very interesting that particular character and many of these other characters. Right now, this is going to be my first part of a series reviewing the religions of Elden Ring, and I will do blogs about Elden Ring, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do them basically in a smaller fashion than I did my Demon Souls blogs. My Demon Souls blogs oftentimes were very big. There was a great deal of information in them. You can find all of this information on my Medium page. If you want, you can come here, you can read all of my blogs. But yes, I'm very happy to have finally done my first Elden Ring blog. I have so much information just lying around. This is for the people who seriously want to know the implications and some of the concepts in the narrative of Elden Ring that you will not find from lore videos, that you will not find from fan videos, and fan means fanatic, and most people who are fans don't really give good critique. They don't really know how to explain things so well because they like what they see so much they can't really think objectively or in a mature fashion about what they see. So these blogs are going to explain things in a very honest manner, and they're going to, as you can see, it's educational. There are so many citations. I will try to explain everything thoroughly. I do hope that this is beneficial to those of you who wish to understand further the interesting stories and implications of the Elden Ring narrative, some of the concepts that they use in the narrative, some of the archetypes that they use. It's all very interesting. So I do hope that this was interesting. I do hope that this was beneficial to someone. Fare ye well, and may ye be blessed. Amen.